What are some of the main varieties of Shinto officials or specialists?
Shinto tradition refers to the priesthood in general as either Shinshoku or Kanishi. Larger shrines with full priestly staffs distinguish among a number of ranks. The chief priest is called the Guji, generally the highest-ranking local official. Guji might have oversight of up to 30 subordinate shrines. The Gonguji is second in command and oversees a staff of several lower ranks as well, including junior assistant chief priests, Shingonguji. Senior priests are called Neki, assistant senior priests Gon-Neki, and regular priests Shutten or Kyujo, fill out the ranks of male staff. A national ranking system also distinguishes among priests by acknowledging their levels of learning with the equivalent of academic degrees, named purity, Jokai, brightness, Maikai, righteousness, Sekai, and uprightness, Chakai. Young unmarried women, called shrine maidens, Maiko, function rather like deaconesses. Dressed in striking vermilion skirts and white blouses. They assist in blessing rituals, run the shrine shop, and perform sacred dance. Maiko traditionally begin their association with the shrine and training for service as sacred children. Highest in rank is the unique position called Saishu, found only at the ISE shrine and held by a woman. She is an imperial princess with the symbolic title Master of the Matsuri, festivals. Assisting her is a priest with the rank of Daiguji, Great Chief Priest, a function unique to ISE. In the imperial household, ritual specialists have either of two ranks. The Shoten parallels the shrine rank of senior priest. The Shoten that of assistant senior priest. But the emperor himself or a personal delegate presides. Much as the Chinese sovereign once did, at over 24 annual ceremonies.
Is there a standard Islamic group liturgical worship?
Islamic ritual prayer, performed 5 times daily, is called salat, from a root that means to make holy. Whenever Muslims gather, they perform the ritual prayer together. That applies not only to the prescribed Friday midday congregational prayer but to any of the set times at which 2 or more Muslims come together any day of the week, whether in the mosque or elsewhere. As with all Muslim ritual practice, worshippers preface this prayer with the clearly stated intention. Naya, pronounced Niya, saying I intend to pray the dawn, for example, salat. From 2 to 4 cycles of standing, bowing to place hands on knees, ruku, pronounced rukoo. Sitting on the heels, jalsa, pronounced jalsa, stretching forward toward prostration. Sajda, pronounced sajda, to place hands flat on the floor at shoulder width. And touching the forehead to the floor, make up the fundamental salat ritual. The number of cycles, rak'ah, pronounced rak'ah, depends on which prescribed prayer one is performing.
What is the Star of David?
Known in Hebrew as Magen David, Shield of David. This important Jewish symbol is composed of two superimposed equilateral triangles forming a hexagram. The symbol was common in many ancient civilizations and cultures, where it served variously for decoration and for the practice of magic. The star was not associated specifically with Judaism during biblical or Talmudic times. It appeared as early as the 10th century as a lucky sign in mezuzah. And later around the 17th century it began appearing on Jewish tombstones and as decoration in synagogues. In the 19th century, the appearance of the star became widespread when it was adopted by Central European Jews as a symbol to represent Judaism, much as the cross represents Christianity. The symbol spread quickly and was in use in most synagogues by the early years of the 20th century. In 1897 the First Zionist Congress adopted the star. Later, it was utilized as the central image of the flag of the State of Israel. During the Nazi period, Jews in Europe were forced to wear a Magen David as an identifying badge.
What is the Buddhist rosary?
Buddhists in many places have used a number of variations on the string of beads for devotional purposes. In ancient India, Buddhists used a string of 108 beads. Very similar to the ancient Hindu rosary, as a symbol of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara. This compassionate being, whose name means, roughly, Lord looking down on the world, took on 108 human characteristics in his saving descent to assume the human condition, using the beads while doing so. Chinese and Japanese images of the Buddha, as well as of various patriarchs and monastic founders, sometimes show them holding rosaries for ritual purposes. The rosary has been particularly important in the more esoteric sects of Tibet and Japan. Tibetan rosaries have 3 larger beads at the end as symbols of the 3 jewels. Devotees in those sects use the beads to count repetitions of their mantras. In some more popular sects, devotees count repetitions of names of the Buddha or phrases like "Glory to Amida Buddha."
How did Lao Zi become deified?
There seem to have been a number of stages in that process. First, the legendary figure began as a teacher and writer, whose image eventually blended with that of the Yellow Emperor when Lao Zi came to be identified as a confidant of royalty. Traditional accounts, such as the life story summarized above, transformed him into a cultural hero whose mother had conceived him virginally. By the mid-2nd century CE, Lao Zi had become the deity who delivered to Zhang Dao Ling the revelation of a new religious faith, giving rise to the Celestial Masters School. But his image was still not complete. Next, perhaps also around the 2nd or 3rd century CE, Lao Zi seems to have been identified as a creator god who also enters the world to rescue humanity from tribulation. Lao Zi was now capable of incarnating himself, almost like a Buddhist bodhisattva. Not long thereafter he joined the triad of the three pure ones. And finally Lao Zi emerged as the chief divine person. We have here one of the more interesting examples of apotheosis, or deification, in the history of religion.
Do Vaishnavites have special feasts in honor of Vishnu or his avatars?
Rama Navami, Rama 9th, during Chaitra in early spring, celebrates Rama's birthday. During a 9-day festival celebrants attend a lengthy retelling of the massive epic Ramayana. A related feast occurs on the 15th of Shravan, a full moon celebration of Rama's crossing over to Lanka to rescue Sita. Two major feasts focus on Krishna. Krishna Janmashtami, birthday. 8th during the dark half of Shravan, in late summer, celebrates Krishna's birthday. For a full 7 days devotees reenact events from Krishna's life. The festivities culminate with a fast and midnight worship on the 7th day, the eve of the birthday. Naga Panchami, Serpent 5th, so named because it occurs on the 5th day of Shravan's bright half, comes in late summer and recalls one of Krishna's many victories over embodiments of evil. His dispatching of the serpent demon Kaliya in the river Jumna. Although the evil demon in this case is a serpent. The fast and feast celebrate the grace represented by other cosmically beneficial serpents as well. Several feasts also recall other specific avatars. For example, on the full moon of Kartika some Vaishnavites celebrate Vishnu's descent as the Savi or fish Matsya.
Is there a standard deist group liturgical worship?
Most of the ritual activity one can observe at temples throughout the day consists of individual or family worship at various times during the day. Members of pious organizations may gather for group chanting of liturgical prayers. The priest may address a sermon to such gatherings as well. Major deist sects have devised their own special communal rituals, and some have survived intact into our time and are still practiced, especially in rural areas and more traditional villages. Many of these involve group chanting of sacred texts, in imitation of the chanting of the assembled gods themselves when they created the universe. One important communal ritual is that based on the teachings of the Lingbao sect. Elaborate theatrical liturgies address issues and powers in 3 levels or registers: the celestial, the terrestrial, and the human. The golden register of rituals honors the family of the emperor at the celestial level. A terrestrial level called the yellow register is aimed at peaceful rest for the deceased. The now discontinued Jade Register once focused on securing salvation for all people. The officiants and their ritual implements mediate between the divine and human participants. Rites once dedicated to the emperor and his court are now undertaken on behalf of local or family groups known to uphold religious standards. Observances begin with an evening or vespers prayer to announce the start of the rituals and symbolically reconstruct a sacred realm in which to enact the rites. Great attention goes into setting the ritual scene. A miniature of the cosmos with gates at the 4 cardinal directions. Action resumes the next morning with a fast and an offering. Imitating a creative divine act, the officiant recreates the sacred space by pacing out creation and journeys symbolically to the heavens to bring down heavenly powers. As part of the ritual, the master, or priest, meditates silently, focusing on visual imagery as a way of bringing health to the assembled people. The entire ritual ends on the next day with the master facing the assembly as one now returned to earth. He then dismantles the altar, burns the sacred texts, and sends the deities back to their heavenly abodes.
What means do Muslim communities use to engage society at large?
In addition to the various forms of charitable giving, an important traditional device within Islamic law has had an enormous impact on life in many Islamic communities throughout history. A waqf is a special religious endowment by which a donor can stipulate that his or her funds be used for a particular project in perpetuity, or as long as the funds last. All over the Middle East and Southern Asia. For example, scores of these dedicated trust funds, established centuries ago, remain in force, administered by members of particular families or by government officials entrusted with a specific mandate for the oversight of the endowments. Many endowments historically have been funded by royalty, but a significant number are supported by the generosity of other wealthy individuals or even collectives of many devout individuals. Trusts remain an important matter today, and many Muslims are devising other ways in which concerned fellow believers can contribute to endowments supporting important communal projects.
What moral options are available as solutions means to salvation, in other words?
Everything from altruistic service to others to the pursuit of enlightened self-interest. From quiet contemplation to extroverted worship. And from active cultivation of good deeds to hopeful resignation in the face of a foreordained outcome.
Is there any further symbolism attached to the structure of the calendar?
Each month is divided into 10-day periods, 6 of those in turn considered a special time period, and 6 of those in turn equaling a full year. In addition, Each year is divided into 24 climatic periods called breaths or nodes, described by such phrases as full of snow or clear and bright. Every year, month, day, and hour are further identified by a combination of 10 heavenly stems and 12 earthly branches, the monthly or zodiacal symbols. The 10 heavenly stems are associated with colors. 2 stems with each of the 5 symbolic colors, azure, red, yellow, white, black, which are in turn linked to the 4 directions and center as well as to the 5 elements. Branches and stems are both primarily numerical designators, but each also bears important symbolic connotations. If you match one stem with one branch for succeeding years, S1/B1, S2/B2, S1/B11, S2/B12, S3/B1, and so on, you end up back at the beginning after 60 years. In this system, only odd-numbered stems combine with odd-numbered branches, even-numbered with even-numbered. We are currently in the 60-year cycle that began in 1984. The result of all this calculation is an extremely detailed system of pinpointing special times according to a host of definitive characteristics. Each event occurring on Earth has its heavenly parallel. For every conceivable type of human behavior there is an auspicious moment. The calendar has thus been not merely a way of keeping track of times for religious observances, but a kind of temporal map for negotiating the cosmos as well. Each year, during the 9th lunar month, imperial officials set up the liturgical calendar for the year to come.
But what about conversion from one Christian group to another?
In those cases, practice concerning baptism varies. Some churches re-administer the ritual in the belief that the convert's former community was not authentically Christian. Others consider all Christian baptism valid and binding, since it is unnecessary to repeat the ceremony. They might substitute for it another religious ritual of welcome into the new community of believers.
Why was Mahatma Gandhi an important Hindu?
Mohandas Karmachand Gandhi, 1869–1948, received the title Mahatma, Great-Souled One, because of his towering example of personal integrity and commitment to social justice. He was a nationalist in the sense that he sought Indian independence from British rule. But he also taught tolerance for religious diversity at a time when strident voices cried out for vengeance against members of other communities of faith. His experiments with truth, satyagraha, truth grasping, led to his espousal of methods such as the quest for simple living and nonviolent resistance to oppression. On several occasions his willingness to fast nearly unto death called attention to the evils against which he fought. Gandhi spoke out often on behalf of the socially marginalized. The untouchables, the Lord's children, he called them, and women. Human dignity and equality were the goals he pursued within the context of a vibrant religious faith. Gandhi's great-souled inclusiveness improved the lives of millions and eventually cost him his own. A militant Hindu, convinced that Gandhi was conceding far too much to the nation's Muslims, shot him on January 30, 1948.
What was the earliest Daoist sacred text?
First and most influential of the Daoist sacred texts is the Tao Te Ching, classic of the Way and its power. Traditionally attributed to Lao Zi, the text actually dates from between 300 and 250 BCE. Authorship and immediate historical context remain uncertain. Its attribution to the Old Master may have arisen out of a desire to lend the text greater legitimacy and credibility. The Tao Te Ching's 81 tantalizing short poems brim with paradox, as they try to describe the indescribable by saying what it is not. Just as the value of a cup is the emptiness within, so the way progresses by, apparently, going backwards. As all of nature acts without conscious effort, so the person who strives in hope of gain loses all. The curiously attractive teaching of the Tao Te Ching emphasizes the way of utter simplicity. Divided into two parts, poems 1 to 37 focus on the way. Poems 38 to 8 yawn on its power. Some describe the way as the passive principle and its power as primal spiritual energy. Anyone who tries to define the way must know that it remains indefinable. Tao is the source of all energy but eludes discovery. Imperceptible yet irresistible, impersonal yet ever-present, the Tao's power is like that of water. The softest of all elements inevitably dissolves the hardest. Although the text may sometimes give the impression that it favors the more mysterious female yin over the male yang, that is perhaps a result of its need to counter prevalent social biases. In the end, life can proceed only with a perfect balance of yin and yang. Mountain and valley, light and dark, dry and moist, evident and hidden.
What are some of the ways religious groups engage society at large?
Whether or not a particular faith tradition mounts major missionary efforts, it will invariably devise ways of reaching out to the larger community. Social agencies devoted to healthcare, disaster relief, feeding the hungry, and sheltering the homeless are an integral part of the institutional histories of most religious traditions. Though they may not be as well known and certainly do not generally have the resources as large international aid organizations, countless local Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, Jewish and other communities have given social concern high priority. For example, The Greater St. Louis Muslim community has extended its care to several thousand Bosnian refugees during the 1990s. Tutoring the children and finding jobs for their parents. Study the history of important temples, synagogues, and mosques across the globe, and you will encounter evidence of social outreach stretching back centuries.
Who are the Vaishnavites?
About half the world's Hindus belong to the various sub-denominations of Vaishnavism. In general, northern Vaishnavas understand Vishnu as a form of Krishna, while most southerners think of either Rama or Krishna as forms of Vishnu. 5 major Vaishnava schools trace their origins to famous founders who lived between about 1000 and 1500 CE. Different ways of describing the divine-human relationship mark the principal distinctions. Among the 5 denominations and the various sectarian divisions that have arisen from them. Ramanuj, 1017 to 1137, was a major figure in a predominantly southern school called Sri Vaishnavism. So called because of the centrality of Vishnu's consort Sri. Ramanuj taught a modified form of non-dualism, called Vishishtadvaita, according to which individual souls are aspects of the divine, part of God, but retain their individuality and do not lose their identity in their union with the divine. Madhva, 1197-1278, disagreed, insisting on a fuller distinction between the human and the divine. His teaching is a type of pure theism in which God freely chooses to reach with love and grace across an infinite and otherwise unbridgeable chasm. Madhva's dualist, Dvaita, branch is also primarily a southern tradition, while the remaining 3 are more popular in the north. Nimbarka, 1125 to 1162, focused on the role of the Guru as the central means of grace in his Mainandi school. Vallabha, 1475 to 1530, taught a form of pure non-dualism, also called panentheism, God in all things. His commentaries on the Bhagavata Purana detail his mystical interpretation of the so-called love games of Krishna, in which the Lord's romance with the gopis becomes a model of the human quest for the divine beloved and vice versa. Chaitanya, 1485-1534, preached devotion to Krishna and Radha through communal dance and song. Of the several contemporary subsects of his Gaudiya Vaishnava group, perhaps the best known is the International Society for Krishna Consciousness.
Are there characteristically Muslim views about how religion and political power come together?
Muslims often describe their tradition as a total way of life, a comprehensive approach that goes far beyond mere ritual observance or showing up at the mosque once a week. Some believe that such an all-encompassing teaching must ultimately be expressed in political terms. Referring to early Muslim community life under the Prophet's leadership in Medina as the ideal. Throughout history, Muslims have experimented with various models for balancing or integrating religious and civil authority. Some have worked well enough, allowing for freedom of religious practice and expression among members of religious minorities under Muslim rule. In fact, the historical record suggests that Muslims have been at least as successful as any other group at administering religiously sponsored regimes fairly and even-handedly. Muslims in various parts of the world today continue to believe that an Islamic government represents the best hope of justice in a troubled world. But in a world where religious pluralism is increasingly evident, dividing humankind along religious lines seems a less than desirable option. The challenge now, as in the past, is to live by the Quranic dictum, "There is no compulsion in religion."
What kind of religious calendar do Hindus observe?
Combining lunar months with seasons of the solar year. The Hindu calendar functions somewhat like the Jewish. About every 3 years it inserts an extra month after a month with 2 new moons. Hindu lunar months vary from 29 to 32 days. The names of the months, with the roughly corresponding Gregorian months in parentheses, are as follows: Chaitra, March/April, Vaishakha, April/May, Jyastha, May/June, Asadeh, June/July, Shravan, July/August. Bhadrapada, August/September, Ashvina, September/October, Kartika, October/November, Margasivsa. November/December, Pansa, December/January, Magha, January/February, and Falguna, February/March. Leap months take the name of the month preceding them. For ritual purposes, each month is divided into its dark and light halves, with associated celebrations. And the moment of full moon is a special time of celebration each month. And some festivals and observances fall each year on the same solar date. Each year is likened to a day in the life of the deities, with the solar solstices symbolizing sunrise and sundown. In addition to the complexity introduced by the blending of solar and lunar reckonings, systems vary still further from region to region in India. Historically, the greater Hindu religious calendar has been so full that virtually every day some Hindu community has celebrated something special somewhere in the subcontinent. Hinduism is not unlike Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox traditions in that respect, except that the majority of the Christian religious feasts are those of saints, rather than of the deity as such. All of this makes for an immensely rich sense of the intersection of sacred times and places. Every day is appropriate for religious observance, and no one day of the week is set aside as an especially sacred time.
Do Buddhists celebrate feast days of any other important religious figures?
in China, Japan, and Tibet especially. Buddhists hold feasts in honor of various bodhisattvas and holy persons. The death anniversary of Bodhidharma, traditionally believed to be the founding patriarch of Chinese Zen, occurs on the 5th day of the 10th lunar month, Bhadrapada, August/September. Events in the life of Tibetan Buddhism's important patriarch Padmasambhava provide a kind of narrative. Sacred structure for the entire year with special observances occurring on the 10th day of each lunar month. Devotees celebrate his flight from the world in the first month, his taking of religious vows in the second, and his miraculous transformation of fire into water during the third, for example. One of the most widely celebrated sacred persons is the Bodhisattva Guanyin, called Kannon in Japan. Her special day is the 19th of a given lunar month, with her birthday occurring during the second month. Her enlightenment during the 6th, and her entry into nirvana during the 9th.
Does ritual sacrifice play a role in Hindu ritual?
In Vedic times, animal sacrifice was a major component in many rituals. Animals as large as horses and water buffalo were offered. Sometimes in great numbers, along with smaller animals such as goats. Nowadays those large Vedic sacrifices are very rare, but wealthy patrons still occasionally bankroll them. Blood sacrifice does, however, survive as a regular component of puja in some temples in India, especially those dedicated to Shiva's terrifying consort Kali. Devotees regularly offer goats and chickens in places like the Kali temple called Kali God, after which the city of Calcutta was named. The term yajna, meaning worship, homage, or sacrifice in a generic or symbolic sense, still describes many different kinds of ritual that involve offering or giving up symbolic or actual goods for the benefit of another. Offerings of special oblations to the deities date from Vedic times. But many Hindus still perform personal deeds of sacrifice in which they connect spiritually with the ancient sages and ancestors, all the deities, and all of creation. Sacrifice for the benefit of living beings, human and animal, includes generosity with sustenance and charitable financial support.
What is religious education?
Much of a tradition's prospects for growth, even for survival, lie in its success in passing along its core beliefs. For the vast majority of the world's people, education in religious beliefs remains a relatively informal process. Children grow up hearing stories from their elders about important religious figures and about the tradition's characteristic sense of ultimate realities. Some traditions, such as Hinduism, still retain some elements of a classical system whereby a select, usually male, portion of the population is eligible for special tutelage in the core teachings. In such a case, religious education is built right into the overall social structure. In the Confucian tradition, education in all that one needs to become a cultivated humanist is the equivalent of religious instruction and is part of the very backbone of the tradition. In other cases, such as Islam in some regions and many Christian churches, separate systems of religiously sponsored private schools have grown up to parallel available public systems. Some traditions have no fully developed structures to replace the public or non-sectarian options, but use periods of special instruction on designated days to reach children and young adults.
Are doctrine and dogma important to Shinto practitioners?
Shinto has been influential in Japanese life through a relatively small number of specific and well-defined beliefs. Ancient tradition teaches the sacredness of nature and of the existence of specific individual and personal divine beings, including those mentioned in myths. Some of those divine beings have had universal importance throughout Japan and the history of Shinto. Others have been of more regional or local importance. The teaching with perhaps the most significant cultural implications is that of the divine ancestry of the emperor. Other important elements of the myth that one could call doctrinal have to do with the divine origins of Japan itself and the essential need of ritual purity. Across Japan and over the centuries, many other doctrine-like features have been important. But Shinto never has been a dogmatic tradition in that it has not explicitly made adherence to a specific set of doctrines a standard for membership in the community of believers. Far more significant has been the standard of participation in community through its vast complex of ritual practices. Those rituals are in turn deeply rooted in the primal myth.
An important feature in this and other rituals is the emotion or feeling, such as dread or longing or joy. What were the religious sects in America in the 1970s?
In the open cultural climate of the 1960s and 1970s, a variety of religions new to the United States, or previously unnoticed, attracted attention from the press and the general public. Some of these organizations engaged their converts in beliefs and activities that seemed strange by traditional standards. Detractors labeled them cults and warned of their dangers, particularly to the young. Among the best known of these are the following: Hare Krishna. Some of these groups came from India, such as the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which incorporated itself in the United States in 1966. The organization attracted increasing numbers of young people who were called Hare Krishnas by outsiders. In cities with large numbers of hippies, passers-by encountered Hare Krishnas dressed in saffron robes with distinctive haircuts, performing on the streets. Even more visible were the Hare Krishnas soliciting Contributions in airport terminals and other public places. TM, another popular Indian guru was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, of transcendental meditation. In the early 1970s, large numbers of people went to one of 350 training centers where they were given a personal mantra. A word they were to use for engaging in meditation. TM, as it was sometimes called, attracted attention from physicians and psychologists investigating the psychic values of meditation. In 1974, the yogi bought Parsons College in Fairfield, Iowa, and renamed it Maharishi International University. When the yogi's followers began to claim that they could levitate and that their meditation could alter world affairs, the movement went into a decline. Moses David, a group that started as a Christian mission to young people in the California counterculture in the late 1960s, took on cult-like qualities when David Berg, the founder of Teens for Christ, began to see himself as the Messiah. He changed his name to Moses David. While the group's name changed several times, it was best known as the Children of God. Berg and his followers established communes on the West Coast and in Texas. Berg himself went to Great Britain, and his movement proselytized around the world. Moses communicated with his followers in letters, called the Mo letters, that spelled out the terms of his developing set of beliefs. In the course of a decade, over 900 of the Mo letters were published, delivering doctrines that departed increasingly from mainstream Christianity, that it fosters in the participants. Other rituals engage the imagination and intellect primarily, allowing participants to enter into another level of experience through meditation or contemplation, for example. Still, other rituals help believers connect in memory with persons now departed or with past formative spiritual experiences they want to recall.
Have relics been important in the Shinto tradition?
Sacred objects play a very important role in Shinto ritual. Every shrine houses some small token of the deity who graciously calls this humble place home for the benefit of worshippers who come to pay their respects. These objects, called Goshintai or revered kami body, are said to include such unremarkable items as a mirror, sword, comb, ball of iron, paintings, pebbles, or pieces of carefully cut paper. Worshippers generally do not get even a passing glimpse of the objects, for they remain always behind the innermost shrine's closed doors. People visit a shrine not so much because the sacred objects are there, as because the presence of the kami makes the place holy. When Christians or Buddhists, for example, make pilgrimage to a special church or stupa, they frequently do so because certain objects associated with a particular sacred person are enshrined there. They may not believe that the objects themselves contain miraculous powers, but it is the presence of the objects that makes the place worth visiting. Shinto's sacred objects play a very different role. Many worshippers may not even be aware of exactly what items a given shrine holds. In other words, the symbols of the kami are of secondary importance from the perspective of Shinto worshippers.
What does the term revelation mean?
Revelation means drawing back the veil that covers the deepest mysteries of life, thus disclosing their inner meaning. Religious traditions that explain their origins in terms of direct divine revelation generally teach that human beings are incapable of attaining ultimate truths on their own and therefore need a supernatural intervention to gain access to saving realities. This is especially true of the so-called Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Some subcommunities within those traditions are quite proprietary about their privileged and exclusive treasure, insisting that only a select few among the masses of humanity are chosen to benefit from the saving power of the divine self-disclosure. They emphasize to the highest degree the uniqueness of their elect status and seem little troubled by the notion that their convictions consign virtually the entire human race to damnation. Other subcommunities make more ample accommodation for the generality of humankind, leaving open some possibility that others not of the fold might still share in the revelation, however indirectly and secondarily. Some theologians talk of God's special revelation to their own traditions, with the broader or general revelation available to others. Alternatively, they might talk of particular and universal revelation. These concessions presuppose that those outside the fold have missed out on the core revelation through no fault of their own and are in no way actively refusing to be illuminated by it. Revelation-based traditions typically envision the divine disclosure as mediated by a series of messengers called prophets, each sent to particular peoples to reaffirm various aspects of the original message at critical junctures of history.
Who are Mahayana Buddhists?
By contrast, Mahayana Buddhists belong to a wide variety of sub-communities, for whom the historical Buddha called Siddhartha Gautama was one of many manifestations of enlightenment capable of saving those who ask for help. Mahayana scriptures evolved in some half-dozen languages over many centuries as the tradition moved through Asia. Mahayana teaching universalized a number of classical Buddhist concepts, broadening their popular appeal and expanding the religious options available to ordinary folk. For example, Mahayana teaching regarded the historical Buddha of this age, Siddhartha Gautama, as only one of many embodiments of enlightenment. Not merely an ethical model, the Buddha was actually a world-filling spiritual presence and power. The compassionate bodhisattva supplanted the more self-contained arhat as a religious ideal. Bodhisattvas represented saving grace as well as a lofty goal to which any person might aspire. Mahayana teachings expanded still further by personifying wisdom as a feminine principle. Attractive and accessible. At the same time, somewhat paradoxically, Mahayana tradition was also a great deal more open to the sort of speculative thinking most Theravadins considered fruitless. Mahayana philosophers developed the concept of emptiness, shunyata, for example, as a way of emphasizing the futility of clinging to anything at all, even to neat doctrinal distinctions. Of the dozen or so Mahayana schools and denominations that arose in India, China, and Japan, too deserve special mention here. First and most popular are the Pure Land communities. Amitabha, Amida in Japan, one of the 5 transcendent or meditational Buddhas, rules the Western paradise called the Pure Land. Devotees seek rebirth in that heavenly realm through various spiritual means, including the simple repetition of phrases such as "Glory to Amida Buddha." In addition, several major Chan, Zen in Japan, lineages have been extraordinarily influential in Eastern Asia. The Soto school emphasizes quiet, methodical meditation, while the Rinzai school uses, in addition, the mind-stopping device called the koan to hasten the seeker's experience of enlightenment.
How do Hindus use statues and other similar visual imagery in worship?
Sacred sculpture plays a central role in the overall symbolism of Hindu devotional ritual. Individual images, called vigraha, something one can grasp, of each of the major deities are generally of granite or marble, though some are made of other materials. Sculptors follow principles laid down in medieval texts that stipulate in detail the proportions and features essential for each deity. Some regard dark stone as the ideal medium because it suggests infinite power and mystery. Images are not themselves deities, but merely specific places in which the deity condescends to dwell for the benefit of devotees. When devotees lavish ritual attention on the images, they acknowledge the sacred symbolized there, rather than any power inherent in the material image. Each major temple image resides in a cave-like shrine called the womb chamber, Garbhagriha, that offers an essential clue to the metaphorical purpose of sacred sculpture. Images represent the dark mystery of divine fecundity from which all things emerge. Central to image-based ritual is the notion of darshan, seeing and being seen by the deity. In a manner analogous to Eastern Christian use of icons, Hindu practice interprets the eyes as the central visual symbol in the relationship between the devotee and the ultimate object of devotion. God sees the individual as surely as the devotee sees God. It is neither magic nor simple idolatry, but an acknowledgement of the fundamental human need to pray with all the senses. Images offer devotees something to hold on to, a way of understanding.
What special rituals do Christians engage in at home?
In Jewish tradition, the home continues to be the center of religious life and education. Many Christians tend to think of church as fulfilling that purpose. As a result, there are few Christian rituals universally associated with the home. Among the few common practices Christians report as important to them are shared reading of Scripture and group prayer. Whether in connection with meals or as a distinct activity. If there is one religious activity that qualifies as a regular ritual in the majority of Christian homes, it is probably the practice of bedtime prayer with the children of the house. This can be a powerful formative influence on young Christians, because they can learn to include others in the orbit of their religious concern. Praying for thus becomes a way of connecting spiritually with the rest of the world.
How does the hierarchy among Shinto shrines work?
Over the centuries, Shinto authorities have devised a number of structures and classifications by which to distinguish various levels and functions of shrines. The most important is called the shrine rank system, Sheikakusaido. That has been in place since shortly after the Meiji Restoration of 1868. Jingu designates shrines of top rank under imperial auspices, such as Meiji Jingu, in Tokyo, which enshrines royal ancestors, and Ise Jingu, which is at the top of the hierarchy and is called the Daijingu, Grand Imperial Shrine. Next in rank are the approximately 100,000 jinjia, a generic term including virtually all shrines larger than little wayside structures. About 250 are included on a special list of highest-ranking ones. Of these, some 200 were designated prior to World War II as governmental shrines, Kansha. Many larger jinjia have spawned affiliated or branched shrines called buncha. Multiple shrines dedicated to a single kami generally constitute distinct families, with one shrine usually acknowledged as the original foundation from which branched shrines developed. Some very important jinjia, such as Kajiga in Nara and about a dozen others, have the honorific title Taisha, Grand Shrine, roughly equivalent to Cathedral Basilica. They are also part of a cluster of 22, Niju and Isha, institutions elevated to special status. But even they are divided into 3 levels, 7 high, 7 middle ranking, and 8 lower. That grouping arose out of the practice of ranking shrines within a given region according to their order of priority on pilgrimage routes, or to guide devotees intent on visiting a sequence of holy places. In various prefectures, a further ranking of area shrines simply lists them as first, second, or third shrine, acknowledging the 3 regional shrines that draw the largest crowds of worshippers. A number of jinjia, some count 138, have been specially designated as nation-protecting shrines. Gokoku jinjia, because of their dedication to the souls of those who died in battle. 27 shrines within that category, also called deceased spirit invoking shrines. Shokansha, have been accorded a special rank because of the importance of the heroes from all periods of Japanese history that they commemorate. Tokyo's Yasukuni Jinjiya ranks at the top of that category. Before 1945, countless smaller local memorials represented the bottom of this hierarchical category. The main central administration is called the Association of Shinto Shrines. Jinjiya Honcho, which has branches, called Jinjiya-cho, in each Japanese prefecture.
How are Shinto leaders chosen and given authority?
Shinto priesthood has historically been a hereditary occupation. Even after the government officially took over the appointment of chief priests after 1868. Hereditary succession continued in many localities. Perhaps the most important ingredients in maintaining standards among Shinto officials are the two educational institutions now solely responsible for the training of priests. Tokyo's Kokyugakuin, National Learning University, is a relatively recent development. A private university that offers general education as well as the equivalent of Shinto seminary curriculum. It supplies research for the present centralized shrine authority, the Jinjiya Honcho. The Kagaken, Imperial Hall of Learning, University near Ise was originally a public institution that closed after World War II and then reopened in 1952 as a private university. Priests to be study Japanese history and literature, but focus on Shinto studies, especially ritual and theology. Shinto priests are not ordained clergy, strictly speaking. They are laypersons granted certification or licensure upon satisfactory completion of the seminary curriculum and its qualifying exams.
Who is the Jade Emperor?
One of the more intriguing personalities in the Daoist and CCT pantheons is the Jade Emperor, Yu Huangdadi. His emergence as a power to be reckoned with in popular worship offers important insight into the dynamics of Chinese religion generally. During the 5th and 6th centuries, Yu Huangdadi was but one among many relatively minor deities. During the Tang dynasty of the 7th through 9th centuries, he gained prominence as a result of the appearance of a new text called the Jade Emperor Scripture, Yu Huangjing. It tells how centuries earlier a queen had dreamt that Taishang Daojun, second of the three pure ones, handed her an infant. She awoke and bore a child, who after a short time as a young prince, withdrew to mountain solitude. Lengthy spiritual discipline transformed the youth into the Jade Emperor. In the 10th century, a Song dynasty emperor named Zhenzong, r. 998-1022, chose Yu Huangdadi as his patron deity and spread word of an expected revelation that came in 1008 in the form of sacred scriptures, thus bolstering the weak emperor's position. Thereafter the Jade Emperor rose to the top of the popular pantheon, thus becoming the CEO of a divine bureaucracy. Stories like that of the Jade Emperor help to explain why enumerations of the deist and CCT pantheons are sometimes a bit confusing.
Do Muslims believe in angels?
Angels function in Islamic tradition much the way they do in Christian tradition. They are beings of light and great intelligence who enjoy the presence of God and do the divine bidding throughout creation. Several angels stand above the rest. The four archangels include Gabriel, who brings revelation to the prophets, Michael, arch-nemesis of Satan, Israfil, who will sound the final trumpet, and the angel of death, Azrael. In some important respects human beings stand above the angels. When God has Gabriel guide Muhammad through the seven heavens, Gabriel must part company with the prophet as they approach the throne of God, lest he be burnt to a crisp. Even the first human being, Adam, knew something to which the angels were not privy: the divinely ordained names of all things created. God assigns 2 guardian angels to each human being. 2 especially business-like angels called Munkar and Nakir have the unpleasant but necessary task of visiting each deceased person in the grave and administering a final exam about the content of the individual's beliefs. Numerous hadiths and charming traditional stories tell of the solicitous presence of countless angelic spirits, who are ready to attend the devout at every important moment and squire them through life's most trying challenges.
What was religion in ancient Rome?
Like the ancient Greeks, early Romans practiced a form of religion that recognized many gods. As Roman and Greek culture came into closer contact throughout the classical period, Romans began to borrow many Greek religious beliefs, and more ancient Etruscan gods took on the characteristics of Greek gods. Thus, for instance, the Roman Jupiter, the king of gods, became associated with the Greek Zeus. Ceremonies and superstitions played a significant role in the daily lives of Romans. Omens from nature often influenced the actions of leaders, and priests divined the intent of gods by observing the organs of slaughtered animals or the flight of birds. As time passed, Roman religion began to lose favor among the people. As Roman society became more decadent, there arose the need for a religion that offered greater moral and spiritual assurances. A new religion, Christianity, gained in popularity and eventually became the primary faith of Rome. In addition to Greek culture influencing religion in Rome, other facets of Roman culture were also affected by the Greeks. The Romans held significant esteem for Greek life and adopted certain elements from it, ranging from sculpture to libraries, architecture to philosophy, while preserving some of their own valuable strengths. The result of this merging of ideas is known as Greco-Roman culture.
Why is Mecca a holy city for Muslims?
Mecca, in western Saudi Arabia, is the birthplace of the Prophet Muhammad, c. 570, and was his home until the year 622, when those who opposed him forced him to flee to Medina, a city about 200 miles north of Mecca. Muhammad later returned to Mecca and died there in 632. Mecca is also the site of the Great Mosque, which is situated in the heart of the city. The outside of the mosque is an arcade, made up of a series of arches enclosing a courtyard. In that courtyard is the most sacred shrine of Islam, the Kaaba, a small stone building that contains the black stone, which Muslims believe was sent from heaven by Allah, God. When Muslims pray, 5 times a day, according to the 5 pillars of faith, they face the Kaaba. It is also the destination of the Hajj, or pilgrimage.
Who were David and Goliath?
David, second king of the Israelites, born circa 1013 BCE, is one of the most vividly portrayed characters in the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament. He was a warrior, lawgiver, musician, and poet, loyal to his superiors. Harsh in his judgments, ruthlessly cruel in war, but singled out by God for glory. He stands at the center of several crucial events in the history of the Israelites and has, accordingly, been a subject of exhaustive study among Jewish scholars for centuries. Christians have been almost equally fascinated with David, some seeing him as an Old Testament foreshadowing of Jesus, and others noting that Matthew's Gospel begins by tracing Jesus' lineage through the house of David. David is perhaps best remembered for his epic duel with the giant Goliath, begins I Samuel 17. A Philistine who was demoralizing the Hebrew army by offering single combat that no one dared accept. David, swearing that Yahweh would defend him, took up the challenge. He stepped forward, unarmed, and struck down the giant with a single stone from his slingshot. The Philistines panicked and fled, pursued and cut down by the Israelites. David is also known as the greatest of all Hebrew poets, having single-handedly composed the biblical book of Psalms.
Do Muslims believe in miracles?
Muhammad's early critics in Mecca sometimes taunted him for being so much like an ordinary human being. If he were really a prophet of God, surely he would entertain them with some sort of heavenly pyrotechnics. Muhammad regarded the Quran itself as his only miracle, a marvel of eloquence uttered by a man considered technically unlettered. but the scripture does refer often to spectacular signs God brought about to vindicate earlier prophets. For example, Moses' staff became a dragon that devoured Pharaoh's magicians. And Moses' hand turned white with leprosy and was then restored to health, Quran 7:107-08. Within a generation or two of Muhammad's death, tradition had begun to attribute to the prophet a number of extraordinary occurrences. He could fast for inordinately long periods, could see people behind him, heal various ailments, supply water where there was none, and stretch limited food sources as needed. Trees and stones saluted Muhammad, a pillar in his house mourned that the prophet no longer leaned on it when he preached. And the prophet split the moon in two to confound his critics. Throughout the history of Islam, holy persons called friends of God have been famous for the ability to perform wondrous deeds. Many Muslims today regard accounts of such legend and lore of secondary importance. Classical Muslim theologians devised technical terms to distinguish between two levels of miracle. They called the works God did as proof of his prophet's truthfulness evidentiary miracles, mu'jizat. Pronounced mu'jizat, and those effected by friends of God marvels, karamat, pronounced karamat. Theologians further called attention to key differences between works of sorcery and wonders performed authentically under divine power.